Real quick before we get into the interview. One of the first exercises I run with executive teams is mapping their business portfolio to visualize the current work in progress and how it aligns to the overall business strategy. Now, without exception, every time I run this exercise, the gap between the current state and desired state is far wider than every executive believed, hoped, or even imagined. I've put the exact template to use, how I do this, and made it free for all of you to download by following the link in the comments. Go get your copy and let me know how it goes. Now back to the show.
Welcome to the UNLEARN Podcast, where we explore bold ideas and unconventional strategies that challenge the status quo. Today, we're excited to host Emily Ross, a powerhouse in brand strategy and creative leadership, and co-author of the game-changing book, Just Evil Enough: Subversive Strategies for Market Dominance. Emily is currently Director of Brand Strategy and Creativity at X for Europe, the Middle East and Africa, where she helps global brands push the boundaries of what's possible. Her career is diverse and innovative as you could imagine, from working at companies like the first Twitter, to co-founding the Renaissance Festival, a TED-inspired celebration of ideas and creativity. She also is an advisor for South by Southwest. Through her book and the groundbreaking work, Emily shows how thinking just evil enough, strategically and subversively, can help businesses stand out in a noisy world. Get ready to unlearn outdated marketing rules and embrace fresh perspectives from one of the brightest minds out there. So let's get started with where it all began for Emily.
Enjoying the podcast? Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on YouTube. This way, you won't miss any episode and it greatly supports our podcast.
I was at ESAT, if you remember those days, in the 3G network engineering department. So this is when 3G was just a glint in people's eye and we were building the 3G network. I know, I'm very old. I had a boss. I dropped out of college. I was building databases and I'd picked up this kind of job that I planned to do for, a couple of months to, before I was going to head back to Ibiza. It was the 90s.
Yeah, right out. Good time, better time to be there as well.
And I got this job and I had this boss and he was absolute arsehole. Like I couldn't be late. I could not do anything at the time. And yeah, he was and at the time I was like, his name is Eamon O'Flynn. Hiya, Eamon.
Good. How you doing, Eamon? Great to have you on the show.
And but in hindsight, and actually I realized it fairly soon after, he was my first mentor. He taught me accountability. He taught me hard work, and he taught me a couple of things. There's no point being occasionally brilliant. Consistency beats brilliance. Occasional brilliance, kind of hands down. So I really learned the ropes about delivering. And what a high performer is. A high performer isn't somebody who's occasionally spectacular. A high performer is somebody who brings it all day, every day. So that was definitely a step change in my own career. That the day I learned that was the day I think I became a much more successful human. And then the second, I suppose, pivotal moment was when I became a circus performer. So and there's a whole other story there, but basically for a couple of years I was a professional fire performer. I was fully insured. Well. I did all sorts of amazing gigs and TV production, and what I learned about the circus was about attention, about how powerful it is to be able to capture people's attention, and then understanding whether that's through performance or any kind of communication, the ability to capture attention and hold it is something that's intrinsically human, something that is a superpower and is applicable to everything, absolutely everything we do.
Well, I love the circus one because we've actually had someone else who ran away to join the circus on the show, who was actually closer a connection to you than you might really realize. So as you say, you've written this book with Alistair, who wrote Lean Analytics. The author of Lean UX, there was two of them, Josh Scheiden and Jeff Gothelt.
Yeah.
But Jeff Gothelt actually would join the circus for a while. And he's like
I
one
feel
of
like I need to create some sort of like small cohort of
well,
this kind of weird overlap of like circus plus tech.
literally, but it gets even better, especially we musicians. You won't believe one of the reasons that a lot of the folks in the Lean series got on so well is so many of us are musicians. Jeff is also an amazing jazz piano player.
Wow.
Eric Rees is an unbelievable musician too as well. I did both in DJ, and so does Alistair DJ, as you know. So there's all these, it's kind of hilarious as you share these stories, but so many of the things that jump out, as you say, it's this idea of learning about creativity, how it shows up, whether it's through art, whether it's through science, which is a lot of the work, obviously, that, applies to what you do as well. But it's always fascinating, how people sort of have these components that sort of come together to help them do what they want. The other thing I really like about what you said about that sort of first experience of working with someone who taught like consistency and how important it is to be, your best every day. Like, that's a really hard thing for many people to learn, especially in sort of, if you will, sort of the way the world works at the moment. You have all these people who are creating themselves as, exceptional moments. And I went for a run and now I make $100,000 a year and only work 3 minutes a day. And like this sort of sensationalism, if you will, that goes with like, what does it become to take great? But yet all the best people I know are folks who can consistently show up every day, and they've built excellence through lots of repetition, lots of iteration, lots of mistakes too as well. So how has that helped you when you even think about, the things that you start to focus on today, right? Again, I just love the title of this book. It's my favorite title in ages, Just Evil Enough. There's so many lessons packed into this that are counterintuitive, that are subversive, that sort of are contrary thinking. And it's a huge part of what we love on the show. We always want people who have these sort of, against the grain, counterintuitive type thinking. So how are some of those sort of experiences, have you shared before, from like this discipline, but also creativity and attention? Like, how has those sort of helped you form a lot of the ideas that are captured in the book, and, really informed the kind of work that you're doing today?
I think you're absolutely right about the trends around overnight sensations. And yeah, we can take those all with a pinch of salt for sure. But I think one of the things that the book taught me, or rather allowed me to really delve into, was that actually, if you want to be successful in your marketing, you can't be a one-trick pony. You might be able to exploit a loophole or a vulnerability to get ahead, and that's kind of the thinking of the book. But channel decay is real. Everything burns out over time. So the things that work now will not work in the future, and the things that worked in the past, you can't just keep doing them. So you have to craft a subversive mindset so that you're always looking for the latest and the newest opportunities. So you have to bring a subversive mindset every single day, and you have to train yourself to not keep doing the same thing over and over again. So I feel like I'm kind of contradicting myself, but actually we differentiate in the book between growth hacking and subversiveness. And growth hacking is that, big exploit that you brag about immediately. Like, first of all, if you find something that works and then you brag about it, everyone else will know. So that's a dumb move right away. Okay, so don't brag about the things that you've done really well. Like, shut up is one learning. And also that, like, yeah, everything burns out. So, like, if you think back to something as mundane as display advertising, when it came out first, it was reported to have, and it was in Wired, which was Hot Wired back then, the first banner ad, and it said, you're going to click here. And it had something like, 40% click-through rates. Now in display advertising, you're talking about 0.002%. Like, it's fractional, and it's trivialized. Everything burns out. So you have to learn to think opportunistically, and then you have to be experimental, and you have to bring that mindset consistently every single day.
It's really interesting, right? Like I some of these things, like I say, I love the counterintuitive aspects, right? If you find something great, it's actually almost a secret for you to accelerate towards the outcomes you're aiming for, right? And I like those ideas as well, where it's like, you know, when you see these opportunities, you got to maximize them. It gives you that differentiation in the market. It's a highly competitive market when you're building products, when you're trying to get people's attention, especially in this sort of internet world that we live in at the moment, right? And then I always think it's kind of funny sometimes. I've seen when you find these great innovations, you got to leverage them. But then when you see the tipping point start to go down, that's always a great time to tell other people about it, I find. Because then they all scramble to try and replicate what you had done, but you know is on the sort of downturn in a way.
Yep.
It's a great way to like get competitors in
win-win,
sort of
actually. Yeah, so you get the
right?
kudos of the knowledge, and then you've tapped it out, and you can move on to the next thing when everyone's busy, like following suit. Yeah.
So you in the book, it's like packed with a bunch of these, right? I think you said there's like 11 of them. There are some of these like counterintuitive sort of examples, right? Which we absolutely love on this show. It's all about unlearning. It's like letting go of past success to achieve extraordinary results. So tell us some of these ones that jump into your mind, or sort of some of your favorites.
So one of the reasons why the book took so bloody long to write was that initially we'd written a bloody good book about subversive marketing. You know, we had hundreds of case studies and examples from across history, from like Genghis Khan through to Farmville, you know. And actually, a couple of years in, we were approached by the team at Maven, which was Gagan Biani and an amazing woman called Wes Cow, who we've quoted in the book, who were starting a cohort-based learning platform. And obviously, Alistair's book, Lean Analytics, had already been on Udemy and was very popular. And so they had asked about Lean Analytics. And so we took it upon ourselves to turn it into a course. It's easy to talk about something. It's much harder to teach it. And actually, the core of the book changed because we had to take what we knew and what we could easily talk about and actually turn it into something that was learnable. And so it turned into frameworks and tools to actually help teach people to think subversively. So within it is the Recon canvas, which helps you make a map of your landscape, and then a bunch of different ways of thinking, these subversive tactics, and there's 11. Bait and switch, aggregation, bug into feature, lots of different examples. And then within those, we tell the stories of the case studies that like bring them to life. But I think bug into feature is probably the one that's most aligned with unlearning. Like, how do you take something that is like potentially failure or something that you're like ashamed of and turn it into your secret weapon? And so I had great fun researching that particular chapter. One of my favorites, well, I think it's interesting, but I think any gamer will know this already with their eyes closed, is this example from Space Invaders. So Tomohiro Nishikado is the like Japanese godfather of shoot 'em up games. And so they released Space Invaders in 1978. If like in the 70s, chips were expensive and slow, and actually the amount of pixels on the screen impacted game speed. So if you're the little gunship and you're shooting the Space Invaders, as they are being shot, there's less pixels on screen. So the game automatically got faster. Now, if you're a developer and you're fixing code, you'd automatically write a script to try and improve or fix that bug. But actually what happened was it made gameplay much more exciting, because as you progressed, it made the game harder and faster. And so this actually allowed the game to become world famous. And that gamification hack became ubiquitous across all types of games. You know, games that get harder as you progress is quintessential to our enjoyment of the game. So yeah, but there's loads and loads.
No, I love this. Well, first of all, my first startup was actually a mobile games development company. Which really,
I love it.
Yeah. So, but you know, these things I think are really fascinating. Where, you know, interesting examples where, as you say, but something was an issue that people turned it into an actual capability to help the product, the business, the idea get better, right? We're so often taught that this idea for perfection to fix things. It's not operating the way we want, but often a lot of it sometimes it's very either impossible to fix, or when you think of ways that you can position it in a different manner, it can have a big success. What other ones come to mind when you think about this idea? Because it's again, it's hard because the programming, if you will, for most people is to try and eradicate any error, and it's sort of a problem. It inhibits people launching software most of the time because they're shooting for perfection, or at least their version of what they think the perfection should be. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about some of those as examples, because it's fascinating.
So reframing is one of the 11 tactics. It's actually really powerful. So reframing, repositioning, and there's a brilliant book by another Canadian, obviously awesome, April Dunford. I recommend it all the time. But getting your positioning right, which her book tells you how to do, is like having the wind at your back. But understanding the power of reframing can be transformative for any business, because you have to understand, where you are on shelf and how people consider you when they're making their purchase decisions. Like, tiny example, last night my son was hungry and he said, "Mom, will you cook dinner?" And I said, "Cook it yourself." And he said, "Oh, Mum, I have to share." So I said, "Grant." I said, "What do you want?" And he said, "Can I have some instant pasta?" I said, "What on earth is instant pasta?" And then I realized what he meant was fresh egg pasta. So in my head, this is the expensive, fresh, healthy pasta. And in his head, it's instant pasta because it cooks really quick. And I'm like, he completely reframed pasta in my head. And so I was just like, oh, okay, kids are brilliant. But if you look at all aspects of your product and actually really understand why people use it, and generally what you think is special about you or your product is wrong. And what you have to do is you have to actually speak to your customers, you have to speak to your competitors and understand your world in their terms. I think that's, but there's some really good examples again in the book. Like we talk a lot about electric vehicles, and we talk about how originally when EVs hit the market, it was all about range and affordability. And actually when Tesla came along, they completely reframed the conversation because they made it about performance. And they did that by drag racing supercars and winning. And so it stopped being about price and range. And the people who cared about price and range didn't have the same deep pockets as the people who cared about performance had. And so by reframing the entire EV market, they unlocked a cohort of customers that would never have considered buying an EV perhaps in the past.
Yeah, no, it's a great example, right? And it's also a really difficult thing to do, right? Like I often I fall into this track with products I've been involved in. I see it all the time in our studio, is that you have a vision for what you believe this product to be, what its positioning is, what its features are that you think are going to, resonate with your customers. And actually that one of the hardest things is recognizing when your belief of what you think the great characteristics of your product aren't landing with the customer audience. And you think you've this amazing product and you're like, why haven't I getting this product market fit? Why haven't I sort of getting a detraction, if you will, that you're expecting from that? And it's really, really difficult. I've seen it myself personally, but also when founders try to reframe that. So what are some of the techniques you help them? Right, listening to customers is a huge part, right? But you also have this sort of founders that have this strong mentality going, no, they'll get it if I just keep adding more features, enhancing to it, or just keep telling them what it is. So tell us some of the things that can help people identify that there is sort of a gap, if you will, between and a reframing is actually necessary.
First of all, if we're talking about startups and scale-ups, they're spending all of their time on the product, and that's because it's their safe space. Like everybody I know that's, especially in tech, you're right, they're adding more features. And, one of the things that both of us, myself and Alistair, do when we're speaking to startups is, asking people how much time they're spending on the marketing and how much time they're spending on the product. And invariably they're spending far too much time on the product because
Oh,
it's their
agreed.
happy space.
Yeah,
It's
I
their comfortable
couldn't
space.
agree
And
more.
actually,
Like
we have to
90%,
say you have to
easy.
spend as much time on your go-to-market strategy as you are on the product, because go-to-market is the hard bit. Product is easy. And I say that because, and it annoys a lot of founders because
Yeah,
they're like, it's
that's what
really
we're here to
hard, it's
do.
really
We're to
hard.
shake them up a bit. Yeah, it's no problem.
But
Yeah.
like they're all spending time on the product when actually capturing attention and converting it into profitable demand is by far the hardest skill they will ever do. And they're not spending enough time on it. So the entire book is about this problem. And so one of the things that we also point out as well, actually, there's a whole piece about underdogs and why you have to think subversively in order to get ahead. But I want to talk about product market fit, which you mentioned. So product market fit is a crock of shit. It doesn't exist. What actually exists is product medium market fit. And so what happens in between the product and the market is critically important and is fundamental to the success of any business. And so first of all, you have to make a map of the landscape. And that's what the Recon canvas is. It is actually 18 boxes. And it looks at your entire market landscape. There's 6 boxes for product, 6 boxes for medium, 6 boxes for market. And it forces you to think objectively, subjectively, and collectively, which sounds kind of complicated, but it's basically breaking down the entire landscape into little boxes that you can look at one by one. And we encourage you to just try and flip on its head. And so within the medium, you have to understand what's changing. And the medium in particular is always changing. So you're thinking about what channels your customers are using, what media they listen to, the norms and behaviors of their demography. And so by exploring the medium and by giving yourself permission to think counterintuitively or provocatively about these various different aspects, it gives you a step-by-step tool to actually uncover opportunities and loopholes. And we really feel that you have to, like, the rules were written by the incumbents. The rules that we all believe we need to follow aren't necessarily true. They're just behaviors that the incumbents want us to follow so that we're not going to challenge them. And actually, if you want a level playing field, what you really have to do is tip the game in your favor.
Yeah, no, it goes back to the point we said before, right? Where, when you figure out the secret, you leverage to its maximum capacity, and then you can distribute a simplification of what you went through, if you will, to get there.
We call those 0-day exploits. So in cybersecurity, a 0-day hack is one that is a kind of a finite hack. And we equate this idea of subversive marketing kind of like the difference between a 0-day exploit and a script kiddie. So a script kiddie is like a growth hacker. They're exploiting known vulnerabilities. They're obvious. They're known. But a 0-day exploit is something that you might only get one shot at. And so if you think about it in terms of like magic, Penn and Teller, they're your 0-day magicians compared to, say, like a party clown. So you have to give yourself permission to take advantage of those 0-day exploits. And when they're gone, they're gone. And yeah, maybe read the wind. One of my favorites that I had personally learned from was when I worked at a medical health platform called What Clinic. There we used a lot of data aggregation for search engine optimization. So we would take data, we would push out these stories, and the stories would generate backlinks. And actually those backlinks had a profound impact on the business because it allowed us to generate traffic, which we could monetize. But actually when we started this hack of taking data-driven stories and pushing them out to global publications was very effective because 1 in 4 hits would generate a backlink. And after 3 or 4 years, it would be 1 in 10. would give us a backlink, because publications started to understand the power of links from a domain authority perspective. And that's an example of channel decay. What we did started to be less effective over time, and we had to be able to recognize this and find new ways of achieving the same thing. So yes, that's my...
No, like it's great what you're describing, right? Because at the end of the day, it is a competitive landscape, right? And you've got to find these niches, these sort of, back doors where you can outmaneuver the incumbents to a certain extent. Like that's a lot of the game. And when people are sort of, you give them, oh, this is the way you identify a customer. This is the way you scale your product. Here's the tech stack exactly that you have to use, right? Like things as they become sort of best practices, they're much harder to get a differentiated performance improvement because, again, they're called a best practice because everybody has figured out that sort of code and they're sort of executing against it. But as you're describing, even in these little examples, whether it's like this ability to generate backlinks that will create more traffic, right? That gave a performance increase for a period of time. But then, as you say, I like this idea, the sort of performance decays because more people find that path too as well. And even with algorithms today, that's really how they work, right? There's someone who's playing the game of trying to optimize a new path through the system ultimately, where they get a performance increase, where they maybe get more views, where they get more identifications of things, and then everyone starts to replicate that path. And then, in order for the platform that the sort of algorithm is on, for it to keep it interesting, they have to evolve the algorithm, right? Which means different characteristics or features of that algorithm matter in order for people to see relevancy to it when they look at a feed, when they try to work in any way. So it's always fascinating, I think, when you think about ways that people try to understand the game and then find the subversive tactics to usurp the incumbents to win the game. And, like you say, maps are really important in that world. As you start to lay out the different paths that you can go through that system and ask some of these challenging questions, like how could we flip that? How could we take the conversation in another way? I suppose one mind, as you're describing that to me now, that the thing that really jumps out to me is the whole search mechanism. Like I could even think less than 2 years ago, nobody could ever figure out a conundrum how Google would not be the single source where people go to get data for everything. How do I, make a cup of tea to how do I fix a light bulb? And maybe they've they used a little bit more through YouTube to make it visual. But I think with the advent now of large learning models and this propensity for people to want to talk, this new interface now where people will actually use chat tools like ChatGPT to ask these very sophisticated questions and get more personalized. And then suddenly, Google's panicking because their search engine is basically slowly eradicating, which just seemed impossible. Maybe even a short period of time. So, yeah, it's just great to sort of put method behind the tactics that people are deploying in this world. And what is fantastically captured in the book of just evil enough, because I don't think we're being evil here. I think we're actually doing something that's very deliberate, it's very thoughtful, scientific, it's creative, because you're in a competitive landscape, and this is the game we're playing. And I like that the little guy can sort of flip the incumbents, and that's sort of kind of fun about outmaneuverability and so forth.
There's a study of warfare, I think over 200 battles. I think Ivor Aragon Toft did this study, and it was in one of Malcolm Gladwell's books, I think. And they looked at when a large force utilized conventional tactics against a smaller force. And in that scenario, the larger force was successful almost all the time. Now, when the underdog employed unconventional tactics, that ratio flipped. And so 2/3 of the time, the underdog could win if they employed unconventional tactics. Everything changes. Everything changes, which is a favorite quote of mine from Kurt Vonnegut. I remember when we had Nokias, and we could never imagine a world where our next handset wouldn't be Nokia. And then smartphones. I mean, I can tell
best phone for a festival, like 4 days, and I've still got
I'm
battery
telling
life.
you.
I'm rolling. It's good.
But actually, that's a really good example of reframing, because we used to have, when we were picking a mobile phone, it would be like, how long does the battery last? How cool is it, and how long does it last? And it was all about battery life. And Apple and Steve Jobs came along and completely rewrote the rule book. He basically forced us not to care. We went from having a phone that lasted 2 weeks to a phone that wouldn't last a full day. And we made that perfectly acceptable because he made the other benefits more attractive. So he completely reframed mobile phone use. And I do think there is a market for dumb phones that last forever. The Google thing's so interesting because it has dominated the search landscape for such a long time. I did think that voice would be a significant threat. A couple of years ago, I saw a brilliant session at South by Southwest from the CMO of MasterCard, who had developed a musical logo because they understood that shopping would move from search and click to voice, where you would literally say whatever your voice activated model is, you would say their name and you would make a purchase. And so you're bypassing search landscape and going straight to voice. It's interesting, in the pandemic, more than 50% of product purchases stopped being on Google and started being on marketplaces. So they started being on Amazon and eBay because people knew the thing that they needed and went straight to buying that air fryer or that trampoline. And then they went to marketplaces where they could compare products based on price and reviews. But really, this inflection point to AI is what anthropologists call a cultural ratchet moment. So this is a moment in time that is like no going back. And so we've had it with the printing press, we've had it with the internet, we had it with the automobile. These are moments, moments of technological shift that drive us, propel us forward, and we cannot go back. What I will say, and I say this a lot, is that AI, though, there's an awful lot of drama and waxing lyrical about it. It is simply a tool. It is a tool for human invention, just like the printing press, the internet, the automobile. It's a tool that we've invented. And while we have invented thinking machines, it's still our thoughts that power it. It is a step change, but it is just another one in the history of humanity, and we will navigate it. But yes, how it impacts the way we search and how it impacts Google as a business is fascinating.
So looking forward, right, whether you're a marketer, you're a product leader, anyone in product development really overall, what are some of the things that you've captured in the book that you're most sort of excited to see people start to leverage in the market?
I think the most practical piece of the book is that Recon canvas. And for me, we are drowning in noise. Herbert Simon coined this expression, the attention economy, back in the 70s. And he was actually the daddy of AI. In any system where one thing is in shortest supply, it becomes the currency of the day. And so attention is the thing that we have the least to spare, so to speak. And so we are in an attention economy. For me, I just want to see the quality of marketing improve. Like, do better, which is the most patronizing thing to tell anybody. But like, we have all of this opportunity and potential to be novel, to be brilliant, to be different, to be creative. And actually, you don't have to have pots of money to do it. You don't have to have any money. And I think that's probably what taught me to be the marketer I am today, to run my own businesses, to start things up with no money, to work for not-for-profits, to start things that, didn't necessarily have, investment at the outset. You have to be super creative and innovative to do things differently. And that allows you to stand out. So I hope this book empowers people to bring brilliant, novel, creative, funny, attention-grabbing, effective campaigns and exploits to life, because I'm just like, so much of it is so boring and so rubbish.
Yeah, I know, right on, and I think it's I love the idea to sort of challenge people to keep raising the bar of what quality looks like in marketing, right, and how it's different. So the book now, it's I highly recommend people go check it out, right? Just Evil Enough. What's probably been the most surprising reaction for you when you've either shared the ideas with people, a reaction that you were like, oh, that's interesting. How you've thought about applying it there?
When our publishers sat down, and this was a couple of years ago, and said, well, where on shelf, whose books would it be beside in a dream world on shelf in a bookshop? And I had said, oh, well, next to Rory Sutherland's Alchemy. And so they were like, okay, just in terms of positioning. And one of the most surprising and delightful things was when Rory read the book and blurbed it, and basically said, you can see it on the website and it's also on the book, but like, he's somebody I really admire. His behavioral economics insights are phenomenal. Like, talking about bug and feature, he tells this brilliant story about Guinness. Like, the Guinness pour is a bug, but Guinness have turned it into a feature. Classic.
Absolutely.
And he sees these in everything. He's amazing. I love him. So for him to blurb the book and to say such wonderful things was a real joy. And the same with another personal hero of mine, Cindy Gallop, who is the former chair of BBH and the founder of Make Love Not Porn, which is a phenomenal business. But she is an absolute mistress of attention hacking. She knows exactly how the world works. And she, I approached her cold and asked her would she consider reading the book. And her email back was just started off with, well fucking done. And that was like, I screamed and danced around my kitchen. It was like, yes, I think we've done something special here, because you never know. You do all of this work and all of those late nights and all of that, like research and fact checking and teasing out stories. And then you have a book at the end of it and you're like, I have no idea. I have no idea if this is any good. And to get the kind of reaction from people who, we both really respect and admire was pretty fun.
I do think a book is one of the biggest acts of vulnerability, because you're putting a lot of your ideas, your thoughts, your beliefs out into the world, and it's also, again, a moment in time where it's your best current thinking, and as you say, the world changes, the market will change, things will change, but it is something that you really put yourself out there with to share with the world. And there's really no better sort of feedback mechanism, as you say, is when people you admire reply back to say this is a piece of work that they admire. So yeah, massive congratulations to yourself and Alistair. Again, I think it's a fantastic book. I'm going to highly recommend everybody gets out there and figures out how to be just evil enough to enjoy some of these great tactics that are going to be seminal really in the future of work, how people build products, how they connect with their customers, and maybe sort of usurp a couple of the market sort of incumbents and build something cool with very small, limited resources teams. It's fantastic work. It's been awesome to have you on the show, Emily. Always good to have more Irish authors out there who doesn't love and it's really just great to hear your own story and the great work that you've done. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks so much, Barry. It's been great.
Thanks so much for listening. If you found this episode useful, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Please consider leaving a rating or a review, as it helps others find our podcast. For more episode and details about the show, visit barryoreilly.com, and we'll see you on the next episode.